Hey, Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Thanks so much for being here. In this segment, I want to get to the deepest root of all the roots of everything that's going on with our COVID hysteria. We quote all the time on the show Henry David Thoreau. He said there are thousands hacking at the branches of evil for every one who strikes the root. That's why that's one of the themes of our show. We strike the root of problems. And we've done that. Lots of different roots. But there's the deepest root of all. That's what we're going to talk about in this segment. I'll just give you the kicker right now. I'll just tell you what it is. So stay tuned. No, I'll just tell you right now. It's that people have not come to terms or spent the time contemplating their own mortality. That's the root of it. Let's build up to that. Another theme of the show is that perspective brings peace. And we lack perspective. So let's get a couple points here, maybe 4 or 5 points of perspective. Perspective brings peace. Therefore, lack of perspective brings anxiety. The media should be a force that brings perspective. They don't. They just bring more fear that causes anxiety. And here we are. First point on lack of perspective. Kids dying from COVID. So here's your fact of the day. The swine flu in 2009. Do you remember the swine flu? I don't. I don't remember the swine flu being talked about at all. It killed 3 times, 2009, killed 3 times as many kids as COVID has. It's like almost 1,300 kids died from swine flu, and we're at like 330 or so kids have died from COVID. And that's kids with COVID. We we heard from the professor at Johns Hopkins University who says that there's not evidence that a single healthy child has died from COVID. Not a single one. There could be 0 deaths from COVID in kids. 1,300 from the swine flu. I don't remember it. The regular flu, about 600 kids die every year from just the flu. And we've never taken a single precaution. I've never remember a flu precaution ever. And 600 kids from that die every year. And COVID, none. We're going to strap up our kids, mask them up everywhere they go. It's insane. But if you don't have that perspective, then you can freak out. Like, kids are dying from COVID. And then you get a little perspective. You're like, oh, okay. Well, this is right. All right, second point. We're going to have some hard talk here. You ready for this? A lot of people don't want to hear this, but got to do it. These are CDC numbers. Okay, this is a CDC website. It's cdc.gov. It's one of their own studies. They looked at 5 million hospitalized COVID patients. This is from April 1st to April 1st, right? April 1st, 2020 to 2021. So 1 year, 5 million patients. 95% had at least one comorbidity. The technical term is CCSR, Clinical Classification Software Refined, out of the International Classification of Disease, Volume 10. This is what doctors use to classify diseases. 95% of hospitalized patients with COVID had at least one comorbidity. What are these comorbidities? Hypertension, disorder of lipid metabolism, obesity, diabetes, coronary arteriosclerosis, kidney disease, COPD, lungs, depressive disorders, asthma, diabetes again, different type of diabetes, right? You with me? You see a theme there? If you're overweight, you need to consider 2 things. First, you might consider getting the vaccine. The cost-benefit analysis of if you're overweight might make sense for you to get the vaccine. Because if you're overweight and you get COVID, you're in much worse shape. So you should think about that. Second thing, you got to get in shape. You got to lose weight. I don't want to be a jerk. I know you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to talk about this today, right? And it's because here's the deal. You got to lose weight not to look good, right? That's like always been the motivation. Like, got to conform to a modern beauty standard. No, that's not it. It's for your health. And in a very acute way. Like, it matters big time now. Now, the left's in a sticky wicket with this because the left has created this culture and they've really pushed this message of big is beautiful and this whole body positivity movement. Cosmopolitan magazine just a couple months ago had these morbidly obese women on their cover saying this is not this is beautiful, this is healthy. No, it's not. It definitely is not. You can put a yoga outfit on, it doesn't make it healthy. Fat Studies is a course you can take in college. The course is, it's a program, Fat Studies. I'm not kidding, it's called Fat Studies. So the left has celebrated obesity for a while now, let's say a decade. And then we have this disease that kills obese people. What's the left going to do? Well, they're going to ignore this major variable of who gets hospitalized and who dies. They're going to ignore it completely. They're not going to provide perspective, which causes anxiety in everyone. Now, an interesting part of this CDC study as well is anxiety and fear-related disorders are the second highest risk factor for death. So obesity is number one, anxiety is number two. So they're in the study and they asked why, and they said, we don't know. They threw out a couple ideas, maybe the medications that people with anxiety take, maybe weaken an immune system, because that's what obesity is about, it weakens your immune system. So maybe the medications that anxious people take are just constant stress. Cortisol is just weakening your immune system. They don't really know. But we have the two highest risk factors. There's no question. The two highest risk factors from hospitalization and death and COVID are obesity in America. And we have the left celebrating obesity. And we have the left every day making people more anxious and fearful. Just look at the last, 5 years now, the entire Trump presidency. Every day, you're bombarded with the worst, most, everyone's going to die constantly. For 4 years, it's been that way, even pre-COVID. So our modern culture, for decades now, has made people physically weaker through obesity and anxiety, and therefore a much higher likelihood for death from COVID. So do what you want with that truth. You should lose weight and find peace. Lose weight, find peace, get healthy. And I'm dead serious here. Whatever motivation you've had in the past to lose weight that hasn't worked, forget about those. I got a new one for you. Stick it to the commies. How about that? Lose weight, stick it to the communists. They want you to be fat and fearful. I'm not kidding. The left, the progressive left, the academic progressive elite left, they want you to be fat and sick. So stick it to them. Tell them to shove it. Stick it to the Faucis and the media and the Trump haters. Lose weight, find peace. You want to be countercultural? Get healthy. I'll give you another one. You with me on that? Is that cool? You're not supposed to talk about that. All right, check this out. This is from The Hill. A little point of perspective. The Hill, it's a lefty magazine in D.C. The Delta variant can have symptoms that are more mild and typically not associated with the virus, that some may mistake the illness as allergies or another common sickness. Wait, what? They quote the Louisiana health official, which, by the way, the reason why Louisiana has such high rates of hospitalizations and deaths, there's a ballpark numbers, but I'm within 1 or 2 points. The average obesity, the obesity percentage of Americans who are obese is 32%. The percentage of Floridians who are obese are 24, so below the national average. And the percentage of Louisianians who are obese is 38%. So if you have a higher rate of obesity, you're going to have more hospitalizations and deaths. Anyway, but here's this Louisiana health official saying, many people with symptoms, they seem to be run-of-the-mill, like sinus congestion, runny nose, sore throat. These could be signs that the patient has the Delta variant. What I thought the Delta variant murdered you on contact. And now we're told that if you have the sniffles, it might be, which is it? I think that perspective is helpful for people. Oh, you may still not even know, and you may just have the sniffles. It's better than everyone freak out. All right, I'll give you one more point of perspective before we get to the big one. A little case study here on how easy it is to manipulate people with statistics. Right? So one of the metrics that we use in America to determine the number of cases that exist in a given area is cases, it's called the case rate. Cases per 100,000. You've heard this before, cases per 100,000. And the reason you do that is because you want to be able to compare cases in different, let's just say, states, but states that have different populations, right? So if you're comparing the number of cases in California versus the number of cases in Nebraska, those are two very different populations. So you need to compare apples and apples. So you take the cases here and you take the cases here, and then you divide it, and then you multiply it by 100,000, and then you have your case rate per 100,000, so you can compare apples to apples, okay? That's why they do the per 100,000. Fine. Here's a problem with that. Let's just go to Maine. There's 16 counties in Maine. Only 5 of them have a population over 100,000 people. So how can you have a case metric of cases per 100,000 when you live in a county that doesn't even have 100,000? This is a major limitation of this metric. And this is true for most of the counties in the country, of course, are under 100,000 people. So the statistics say that there's 250 cases per 100,000 people in Waldo County, Maine. Wow, that's a ton, that's high. Look at, things are out of control. Well, there's only 39,000 people in Waldo County, Maine. But 25 cases per 10,000 doesn't sound as scary, does it? So just to be clear with the math here, and I know this can be tricky, if there's 10 cases in Waldo County, which is what there are, that's 25 per 100,000. Excuse me, that's 25 per 10,000. But they don't say that. They say 250 per 100,000. But there's not 250 cases in Waldo County. There's 10. But they just gotta even it out with other populations. So if there were 100,000 people, then there would be this many cases. But there's not 100,000 people, and there's not that many cases. So which metric is scarier? Well, obviously the 250 per 100,000. Using a case count metric of 100,000 for counties across America doesn't make any sense because most counties don't have 100,000 people. Okay, just another point of manipulation for you. Okay, let's get to it. Here's the bottom line. You cannot, we're never going to get rid of COVID. It's impossible. I know the Gavin Newsom, who's going to be the focus of our special on Friday, recalling Gavin Newsom on September 14th, governor of California. He says, well, we're not out of the woods yet. We haven't, the virus hasn't vanished. It's like, oh, geez, that's the goalpost. 2 weeks to flatten the curve, and now it's, well, the thing has to vanish. It's impossible. It will never happen. And it won't happen because it can spread to animals. You maybe saw that viral video of a doctor in Illinois, maybe? And he said, we were able to eradicate smallpox because smallpox never made it into animals. COVID can go into animals. So it'll be here forever. COVID will be here forever. It's never going to vanish. So we got to come to terms with that. So the question now is, how are we going to live life in a modern era with COVID, where COVID exists? That's the question. And this new normal that we're being told, masking kids in particular, vaccine passports, stuff like that, vaccine in order to work. No, this cannot be it. And the reason people are having a tough time finding a new normal is because, and here I'll be the bearer of bad news, you're going to die. And people don't like to think about this. And we haven't had to really think about it in our culture. You are going to die. The rootiest root, the deepest, thickest, most important root of all of this panic is that we live in a culture where people do not have to and have not come to terms with their own mortality. We don't talk about, we don't consider death. We live our lives like we're immortal and we're never going to die. We waste our lives because we don't think about death. We don't live as if there's an end to it. And we certainly don't live as if that end is rapidly approaching and could occur at any minute. This is a new thing. People for all of history used to deeply contemplate death because they were around it all the time. Even when my dad passed away about 6 or 7 years ago, I'm going to sneeze here. TV I've ever sneezed. How about that? First sneeze ever. My dad passed away. He had a stroke. He was in the hospital. We got to say goodbye, sort of. He was in a coma when we did, but whatever. We said goodbye, and then we walked out of the room, and that was it. So even a very intimate death, my father, we were still distant from it, right? We were distant from the body and stuff like that, right? We just showed up at the funeral home, and there it was. So we don't contemplate death in our culture. We're not around it like people always were, always. Remember we shared before, so I got a lot of rants here. We got some great guests today. Let me share this real quick. The Mayflower came over and it got to America and it had to stay off the coast for like 6 months because it was wintertime. Half the people died just with the boat floating there. They had no food, there was disease, rats, everyone was dying of who knows what, and they're just dead. Everyone's just dead, everyone's dying like that person. Have you ever been around like dying people? No, we don't. But here you're on this boat, and everyone's dead all around, right? No one has any relation to that. So we've kept death very distant, and because of that, we think life can go on forever, and we live that way. It's not good. Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor, of course, he said, don't behave as if you're destined to live forever. What's fated, your death, hangs over you. And as long as you live while you can, become good now. The Stoics had a line, memento mori. It means remember that you die. Memento mori, remember that you die. They would contemplate death all the time. Why? To motivate them to live in the moment. The Catholics have, in the olden days, I don't know if they still do today, but they had this line that death destroys everything and takes pity on no one. To death we are hastening, running, let us refrain from sinning. So there's a connection of we're going to die, let us stop sinning. Very different from today. If ever death is considered, like YOLO, you only live once, you're gonna die, so go crazy. That was never the concept. Before it was like, you're gonna die, so do it right, live right. Anyway, so because we don't think about death, we cower in fear. People have never had to contemplate it before. And now we do. People are so arrogant or so distracted and entertained. We don't consider death, so we've had this denial. And then here it comes. And people are really thinking about death for the first time. And what happens when you do that? You go crazy. You go psycho, trying to cling to life. You become neurotic. You become completely out of touch with reality. You think that you're in possession and you can just white knuckle life or hide from death. And that's where all the paranoia is coming from. Like a mask will save you. No, it won't. You're 1 second away from the grave. You're a split second at any moment. Get right with that. Get right with God. You're not in control over your life. You're not in control of that. Humble yourself to that reality. Get that perspective and watch your anxiety melt away. Take precautions, of course, in a sensible way. But you got to live your life. Because living a life of fear and isolation, it's not worth living. Coming up next, I want to talk about masks on kids and the psychological damage that's done on our kids. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Oh, wait, before we do, excuse me, I want to tell you about our newsletter. I've been telling you about our app. It's an amazing app. But I had such a dramatic ending. This was a great dramatic ending, and I forgot the capper here. Great app, of course. Please download that. Also, please sign up for our newsletters. Wonderful. I genuinely actually use this, and this is one of the best. So this is all the important news and the best videos, and just a really quick, good rundown of everything you missed perhaps yesterday or need to know for the day to come. Super easy to sign up. The First TV, first as in the First Amendment, thefirsttv.com. True story. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, there is another theme that we are going to expand in the days to come, and that is stop following hysterical women. Stop being led by hysterical women. Here's one, school board member in Oklahoma.
Because it's just not okay for kids to commit murder by coming to school without a mask. And when it comes down to it, it's possible. They will cause a death have another child because they come to school without a mask.
That's a hysterical woman. and I refuse to let you dictate my life. Okay, so the other day, Ron DeSantis, governor of Florida, of course, had a nice round table with a couple different doctors about masking kids. Mark McDonald was the child psychologist who was present. He was amazing and brilliant. And I looked him up, and he's in LA. I'm in San Diego. He's in LA. I was like, okay, great. So we had him on the radio show yesterday, and he was fantastic. I just want to play this one clip of his. The whole thing was great. Did I put it on the website yet? If I haven't, I will. MikeSlater.locals.com for the whole thing. He was amazing. But here, I asked him, give me an example of how masks are psychologically harming our kids.
I'll give you some examples. I had a child 8, 10 years old in my practice the other day. Father wanted to take him to the beach. Beaches are open. People are frolicking around on the beaches. There's no reason not to be at the beach. The kids used to love the beach. And he said to his son, let's go to the beach today. He said, no, I can't do that. Well, why not? And he said, but Daddy, there are people at the beach. We can't be around people. People are dangerous. We have to wear our masks, and I don't want to wear a mask when I'm swimming, when I'm playing in the sand, so it's just not safe. I can't do that. And his father looked at me just perplexed. Well, what do I do? He looked at me with this face that said, Doctor, what do I do with this? And I shrugged my shoulders and I said, I don't know right now what you do with this. Your kid's been completely reprogrammed.
This idea that we're telling kids to not play with unmasked kids. It's not safe to be, you're a murderer. They're murderers. And what the unmasked kids are learning is that it's not socially acceptable to be without a mask. This is messing with kids' brains. Kids are being rejected, being told you're dirty, you're a bad child. You can't go to camp if you don't comply. If you're unmasked in school, then you have to sit in the way back of the room. You have to be separate from everyone else. Your stuff has to be put separate from other people. You have to stand in the back of the line wherever you go. You have to use a different bathroom than everyone else. You kidding me? We're raising our kids to have separation anxiety and fear. There's plenty of arguments I can make against masking kids. And people say, oh, kids are resilient. Yeah, sure, to a point. Kids can handle stress, but they can't handle strain. That's what the doctor said. Strain's different. You can bend plastic to a point, but then it breaks. And that's when it causes permanent harm. And it causes permanent harm to our kids too. And the most vulnerable kids are the ones who are affected the most. My kids will probably get out of it fine. Other kids with less resources, they're going to be hurt the most by it. Even the English version of Fauci said that kids, they're not going to be masking kids in school in England for all the reasons we've talked about here. And then the theology of it is the soul, your soul is expressed through your face and your facial expressions. What a gift of God the face is. And it's, to say the least, unhealthy to hide it all the time. Masks are isolating. Everyone knows it. We all feel it. Even if many people deny it, we all feel how isolating it is to wear a mask. The expression is, let's meet face to face for a reason, right? It's never, oh, what do you say we meet, arm to arm or chest to chest? No, it's face to face. And this has never happened before. We've never had a period of time, let alone years, where we don't see each other, especially little kids. Little kids who don't see their people's faces. We've never run this experiment before. It's not good. Now you put this isolation and anxiety on top of a decade of isolation and anxiety that we've already built into our culture. Allie Beth Stuckey noticed this. She put this on Twitter the other day, and I've noticed this as well. Among Gen Z, she says many of them don't want to get their driver's licenses at 16. Independence isn't exciting. Many don't want to date or talk to people beyond Snapchat because communication in general is anxiety-inducing. It's like they're emotionally stunted. I can't relate a single bit to not wanting to drive at 16 or not wanting independence. I've heard this from multiple parents now. They're having to force their kids to drive on their own, and I don't get it. It's because it's more comfortable to not. I was watching something the other day, I don't even know what it was, something about cyber cafes in Japan. Japan has a lot of weird subcultures. We do too, but Japan's super weird. Maybe it's all the Hello Kitty stuff thrown on top of it, I don't know. But these people live in cyber cafes. And they're these little tiny cubicles, and they're in front of a computer literally all day long, and they just sleep on the ground, and they never get out. They never go anywhere, ever. They never leave their pod, ever. And they interviewed a woman. That's their pod. They just sleep on the ground right there. And they interviewed a woman, like, why do you like to do this? They live there. They never leave. I want to stress this. And she said, oh, I like the feeling of being around people and not having to interact with them. So she chooses to live in this pod, like the Matrix. And you can look at that and you'd be like, oh, that's crazy. But most of us are not much better than her, right? And we're headed down that road with our kids faster than ever of just keeping your kid in a pod. And if they dare have to go anywhere, well, just put your mask on and you can hide behind it. This is not healthy. We've already had mental illness spike in America. There's already been this push in our culture to call all of the normal bearing of life's difficulties, calling it a mental illness. That's why I made such a big deal about the third rail in the whole world, Simone Biles. I said, if you celebrate Simone Biles and what she did in the Olympics, quitting, then don't be surprised when you get more of it. And that's what we're going to get, way more of it. She's only 24. She's a millennial, right? Or Gen Z even, right? You're going to get a lot more kids who are going to become adults who say, oh, I can't handle, I can't do it. Because they've been trained and raised to only live in their virtual world, on their phone and their video games, not have any, if any, real relationships. To the point where even today they don't, like, why drive it? I don't have to go anywhere. Why do I need a car? Why do I need any independence? I'm fine being dependent on my device. I'll be attached to my phone forever. And I can hide behind my computer and I can hide behind my mask where it's safe. I saw a group the other day of 4 or 5, like 15-year-olds in a parking lot. And it was a weird parking lot. It was an old, weird parking lot. And they had purple hair and they were dressed weird. And one of them was sitting in a shopping cart. And I thought, good for you. Outside, talking, laughing, having fun. I don't see a lot of groups of kids. Saw the same thing of skateboarders. There's a skate park down the street. I like to bring my little kids to it. And there were some high schoolers there. And I thought, good for you. Perfecting a skill, failing, trying over and over until you get it, encouraging each other. I never thought I'd praise skateboarders and purple-haired teenagers milling about in a parking lot in a stolen shopping cart. But this is where we are right now. Because that is a lot better than kids masked up, droned out, and living in fake life. I gotta go here. Someone wrote to Allie. They said, I have this thing called generalized anxiety disorder, and it's a real neurological problem, in case you were wondering why lack of socialness is good or whatever. It's like, generalized anxiety disorder. It's 100% caused by the modern world that you've grown up in, from the food you eat to the things you consume and have been consuming your entire childhood. There's no reason for you or anyone to have this brand new thing called generalized anxiety disorder, where you're just anxious about everything all the time. Why do you think that is? Why do you think you have that? And that person was already like that pre-COVID? We're only making it worse. Coming up next, we'll talk about Cuomo, and before that, the infrastructure bill. And people are missing the budget bill, which is even worse. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word.
As Admiral Akbar said in Star Wars, it's a trap! This is a trap.
Oh, Ted. He's talking about the infrastructure bill, which is a Bernie AOC dream come true. To break it down for us, Ian Murray is here. He's a senior fellow at the Competitive Enterprise Institute. Mr. Murray, how are you, sir?
Very well, thanks. Great. Thank you very much for having me.
Really good to talk to you. My pleasure. Let's start here. Does any of this go to infrastructure?
A small amount, probably about 100,000 in total. 100 million in total, which in a $1 trillion bill, that's about 10% of it. Probably going to new infrastructure and maintenance. The rebuilding that this is supposed to be about. Most of it, however, is for things like elements of the Green New Deal and so on. So actually calling it the infrastructure that people want is probably a misnomer.
Amazing that they can still get away with that. What kind of buy-offs have you seen? I just read casually that Manchin in West Virginia got, some organization his wife works for or something got a ton of money or something. How did they get enough Republicans to sign on to this thing? Who are they giving money to?
Well, this is the weird thing about it. Yes, President Trump promised an infrastructure bill. That was going to be a lot more focused on the sort of infrastructure that everybody thinks about when they mean infrastructure. Things like new roads. Roads aren't part of this bill. In fact, there's even a provision for closing down roads that were supposedly built in the 1960s as some sort of racist move to cut off minority communities from their jobs. But it's transit. Amtrak gets a huge amount of money out of this. Those are the sort of thing. Green charging stations, electric charging stations for cars. The government is basically going to put in a nationwide network of charging stations. Why would you need that if everybody's going to move to electric cars naturally? You'd expect the market to take care of that. But no, the government's going to do it instead. So I'm struggling to find why Republicans would vote for this bill when it's basically a handout to Democrats and left-wingers' favored causes.
Amazing. And then we talked last week about reconciliation. And correct me if I'm wrong with the reconciliation process is you have to get 60 people, which is why you got to get Republicans on to pass the bill. But then later you come back and you say, oh, and here's these other things that we were just a little reconciliation. We're just kind of putting some things, last minute things together. And that you only need 50 votes for. That's probably the trap that Ted Cruz is talking about, right?
That's exactly the trap. Nancy Pelosi has said she's not going to advance this infrastructure bill in the House until the Senate passes the reconciliation. The reconciliation bill is basically a shell that says we're going to put out, we're going to raise the spending limits by hundreds of millions of dollars in each of these cases. And you Senate committees are going to go and report back what we can do with those millions of dollars, and then we're going to vote on that up or down without any chance of amendment.
That's so insane. Like if you add and we've talked a ton about the legislative branch outsourcing their responsibilities to bureaucracies, right? Like the CDC's extending the eviction moratorium, for instance. So there's less and less accountability in the legislature, the people we vote for. And then the things they do are things like this. Like what an absolutely, I was gonna say useless, but it's not, what absolutely corrupt organization we're dealing with here. It's unbelievable. And then inept on top of that, and we don't have to get too deep into the Bitcoin world, but Ted Cruz had some line, he's like, listen, no one in this room can describe what Bitcoin is, and here we are regulating it. Do you have any insight into what they're doing with cryptocurrency?
Yeah, part of the idea that they would get some Republicans on board for was by saying that, oh, well, we'll pay for all the new spending with a bunch of what they call pay-fors. And one of those was that they were going to increase the amount of tax revenue from cryptocurrency exchanges. But nobody who's in those closed doors, the 20 senators in those closed doors who had drafted the bill, actually knows what cryptocurrency is. So they drafted it very, very badly. And basically it would mean that the people who run the blockchain, which is the ledger, the distributed ledger whereby that validates all transactions, they're going to have to start issuing tax notices, 1099 forms, things like that, to people who they don't know who they are. So it's just utterly crazy. This will put the Bitcoin industry, the cryptocurrency industry, into so much legal jeopardy that they will probably just up sticks and leave the country, and we'll have driven out a major source of technological innovation from the country all because the people, the lawmakers who supposedly draft the laws don't know what they're doing.
So frustrating. The budget bill, I understand, is even worse. Right? We have so many bills, it's hard to keep track of them all. What's in the budget bill that's different than this crazy infrastructure bill that doesn't even have to do with infrastructure?
Well, essentially, the budget bill will allow senators on the committees to draft a wish list of reforms that they want to see, and by all accounts, it looks like what they were attempting to do is to turn America into a European-style social democracy welfare state.
Yeah, that's not overstating it. Guys, can you throw that graphic back up a second ago? You put up a second ago? That has a good rundown of it. The one that stood out to me was universal pre-K. But, yep. I mean, look at it all. I mean, it's all of it. You're right, it's all of it. And you're not exaggerating. You're not even like, I mean, we don't want that. You and I don't want that. But they would come right out and be like, oh, yeah, no, we just want to be like Europe. They would say what you just said, but positively, right?
Absolutely. It's one of the things about socialists in America is when you push them on what they want, they always retreat to, oh, all we want is a European-style social democracy. That's all we want. But of course, this actually will go much further than a European-style social democracy. If you look at Sweden, for instance, they have very high tax rates on the middle class to pay for it. In America, they don't want to do that. So you're going to have this huge welfare state paid for by debt spending, which is going to come due at some point and will cause a massive economic catastrophe.
So bad. Ian Murray is here, Competitive Enterprise Institute. Ian, let's talk again, sir. Appreciate you.
It's been my pleasure.
And everyone at the Competitive Enterprise Institute, of course. All right, let's come back and talk about Andrew Cuomo. I'm very surprised that he resigned, actually. So we'll talk with our friend David Harsanyi about what that's about. True story, Mike Slater. Spread the word.
I think that given the circumstances, the best way I can help now is if I step aside and let government get back to governing. And therefore, that's what I'll do.
It's Cuomo, of course, resigning yesterday. I want to bring in our good friend David Harsanyi from the National Review, who's been covering Cuomo and a more grievous wrongdoing that he has not been held accountable to yet. We'll talk about that right here. David, how are you, sir?
I'm well. Thank you for having me.
First, what else do they have on him? Right? Like, are you surprised he resigned? He's the Cuomo name. He's got the unions and all the rest. They have to have something else on him for him to have resigned, right?
I don't know. I mean, I think he's not really beloved by many politicians in New York, you know, the more progressives especially. And I think maybe he just felt like the support wasn't there anymore. And this would possibly be a way for him to save his political career in the future, maybe run for the Senate. Who knows? You know, I don't know what.
Really?
I mean, I doubt that, but I mean, maybe that's how he sees it. I think that if there were, you know, Democrats lose nothing by him resigning. They're just going to another Democrat's there now. There'll probably be a more progressive Democrat running and win the state. You know, when is it 2022? So. I don't know. I just feel like he probably didn't think the support was there and he didn't want to deal with it anymore. But it's hard to say. I don't know what else they might have.
It's so weird that, like, maybe I'm just cynical enough. I just think these people's egos are so massive that they would never relinquish power unless they really needed to, right?
Well, maybe there's something coming. I mean, listen, I wrote this the other day. I think that obviously, you know, what he is accused of doing is bad enough, but he's done far worse. I mean, he is corrupt and he's acted as like a sociopath, basically. His order was the worst or most deadly mistake that any governing entity had made during the pandemic. Possibly up to 9 or 11,000 people died because of it. And then he tried to suppress those numbers. He tried to change those numbers. And then even when he knew what he had done and he had, even as he was, hiding those numbers from the press and the people, even after the Associated Press reported that might have been the case, he took a book deal for $5 million, probably used government services to help him, and resources to help him write it, and walked away a far richer man for having failed. So there's something really wrong with that guy. So I don't know. Maybe there is another AG report coming that's going to find him guilty of other things, for instance, using resources. So maybe he saw that coming and said it's going to be very difficult to stick around.
That really is one of the more surreal moments of this entire last 2 years, is that Cuomo wrote a book on leadership in October of it all, right? It was still early on relatively, and wrote a book on leadership. That's so insane. Let's go back just a half a beat, because I think everyone's heard of this controversy, right? But may not be totally up on it. So what exactly did he do with nursing homes?
Well, I think it was an executive order or some kind of executive action. I don't exactly know how it works in New York, but that forced nursing homes to take in people who with COVID and barred them from testing those people, which we now know, COVID is most deadly with elderly populations. And he, in that move, likely, even though there's not been a ton of coverage of it, frankly, lately, probably, helped spread COVID into the most, the most susceptible population. So other states had initially done similar things, but like Florida, for instance, but they quickly, once they saw that was dangerous, turned it around, but he hadn't done that. But listen, so someone could say, hey, we didn't know a lot about it, right? He made a mistake. We didn't know what was going on, but he hid the numbers after. So he did know he had done something wrong, or he tried to hide that. And I think that shows that it was, he cares about politics far more than he cared about the lives. Certainly not someone who should be writing a book about how to deal with the pandemic.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I was going to play a little devil's advocate and be like, well, we didn't know. It was early on. Do you know, but it's the lack of turnaround, lack of humility there, of course. Do you know what his justification was in the beginning? Was he trying to not have people overrun hospitals or something? What was he at least pretending to say?
I think that was the purpose. You didn't want hospitals to be overwhelmed, and a lot of the older people were going to the hospital. So once, I guess, you remember they were setting up hospitals in Central Park and makeshift hospitals around the hospitals, and people were really nervous. And obviously, many people perished, especially in New York. But he keeps talking about how successful, and others still keep talking about how successful New York was. They have the second highest fatality rate of COVID of any state after New Jersey, which is essentially part of the metro area, and then Connecticut's there too, and Massachusetts. So I think that, yes, to go back to your question, I think the reasoning was that you didn't want to remember we wanted to, all the initial policies were not about saving lives as necessarily just not overwhelming hospitals and the system.
Okay. Yeah, and of course he benefited by being the anti-Trump. Have you seen the media, maybe since Obama, just lift up a person and praise as a hero? He won a stinking Emmy for the love of
I was going to mention that. He won an Emmy. He won accolades from all kinds of people, from Fauci, from, just all around. This is the way to handle it. This is the way to handle it. And no one's ever had to answer for why they're praised. But listen, the sexual harassment cases, no one could know that was going to happen. So I see a lot of people with the gotchas, but, you don't know that the guy's going to be corrupt or the guy's going to be a creep. But you do know that he messed up when it came to COVID. We knew that because even the Associated Press had a big story, and I forget the exact timeline, but before he won the Emmy, I think months before he won the Emmy, talking about how the numbers weren't right. Everyone keeps talking about Florida and DeSantis and this myth that they had messed with the numbers, but New York was the one. They still haven't added those 11,000 deaths, I think, to the overall count. So
think about Dave, sorry to interrupt. I got 30 seconds. Do you think the masks will ever end? Do you think this stuff will ever end? And will the American people push back like we're seeing in some European countries with some actual pushing?
I think you'll see some pushing in some places, but in others you won't. I live in, in the DC area. This is ground zero for doing whatever the government tells you. One of my colleagues calls it Fauci Stan. And, there's masks. Everyone immediately wears masks. I see people running and jogging. It's like 90 degrees outside with masks. I think it's insane. I think that the idea, there's 0 deaths, incidentally, in the county I live in in the last 7 days, and yet there's a mask mandate. So if government, if we're not fighting back on government mandates without any debate, no laws, just a government emergency action on this kind of thing, it makes me a little nervous about what the world looks like and what the country looks like when we have a real emergency again.
That's true too. Let's talk again about that. I hate we got to go. David Harsanyi, National Review, and next time you're here, we'll talk about your new book coming out in a couple months, Euro Trash, as well. Thanks, David. True story. Mike Slater. We'll do it tomorrow. Spread the word.